What exactly was the undergarment just referred to?
Panties, Your Honor.
Do you expect this subject to come up again?
Yes, sir.
There's a certain light connotation attached to the word panties. Can we find another name for them?
I never heard my wife call them anything else.
Mr. Baker?
I'm a bachelor, Your Honor.
That's a great help. Mr. Dancer?
I was overseas during the war, Your Honor. I learned a French word. I'm afraid it might be slightly suggestive.
Most French words are.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhood Podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters, Great Lake Gazers, and Assembly Line Assemblers. This is Ruined Childhoods, and on this podcast, we are covering one movie for each U.S. state. On the last episode, we were getting spooky in Massachusetts, and this week we are cruising west to the Great Lakes state. If you are the shape of a mitten, you are also the shape of this state. Actors born in this state are J.K. Simmons, D.A. Greer, and F.F. Coppola. Its capital is Lansing. Its median household income as of 2020 is $54,900. You guessed it, we're in Michigan, talking 1959's Anatomy of a Murder. Dan, what do you call someone who loves Michigan?
A Michigander-holic? Yeah?
You call them smitten.
Smitten.
That is from a website of Michigan jokes. And it was the only one that wasn't at the expense of anybody who went to a college there and their intelligence.
Got it.
So I went with it.
So is this mitten thing like really part of the Michigan identity?
Oh, sure. So
okay.
It's, you know, if you're talking to somebody from Michigan and you say, well, where in Michigan are you from? They hold up their hand and they say, I'm at this part of the mitten. I mean, yeah, sure. Some people might say Upper Peninsula, you know, maybe give other information, but to hold up your hand in the mitten form, that is the way that some folks describe where they're from in Michigan.
That makes perfect sense. You know, that's actually how I often describe where in Seattle I live, because just the city of Seattle is also mitten-esque. And
is it really?
Well, yes. So where I live is in West Seattle, which it's connected to Seattle proper, but you have to, I'm holding up my hand right now.
It's like Seattle's ponytail.
It's what West Seattle is Seattle's ponytail.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you hold the mitten upside down, it's kind of like if Seattle has a mullet, West Seattle's the party, but that's actually quite the opposite. So no, West Seattle is like where you go if you kind of want a quiet place. Yeah, most of West Seattle is pretty chill. So anyway, that's kind of how I describe, because the city of Seattle does kind of have a mitten-esque or Michiganesque state shape. It's in a
I
state
did not know that.
Yeah.
I feel like anytime I see it on a map, I don't see like the border line to demonstrate the shape of the city.
If you were to look up a map, like a Seattle neighborhood map, so just like a map that has an outline of like all the different neighborhoods and like all the different little, like, all right, there's Georgetown and Soto. You'll kind of see the outline because there's the water that separates.
You know, I'm looking at it right now, and you know what it reminds me of? The Cool S.
Does it remind you of the Cool S?
It kind of does.
Yeah, I mean, no, I would say like I've kind of described it as just to kind of describe like, okay, well, I live on like the thumb, like the upper knuckle of the thumb, and
interesting.
If you go to like the knuckle of the first pointer finger is like where the stadiums are. So, which is not
very
downtown. Yeah, Seattle would be, or like the Space Needle would be more of like, you know, the main knuckle of the middle finger, maybe. Or perhaps the central knuckle of the middle finger.
Fair enough. Well, before we move on from Seattle or Washington State to Michigan, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping, if that's okay. Do I have your permission, Dan?
Oh, we're more than ready to move on from Washington State. Let's do it.
Well, I just want to, this is something that typically would come at the end of a podcast. We don't typically do this, though, but I would love to encourage everybody who's listening to hop on to either Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else where you can rate and review and give us some stars. 5 would be the best, would be preferable. If if you're thinking of giving us a one star, maybe don't do it. I don't know. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram and on TikTok. That's where we're doing all of our social media posting. It's been quite active
we're
in the past year since I've been unemployed. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, which of course, no, we want John to be employed. We want everyone to be employed. But John, you are definitely, but you unemployed are rocking our social media accounts much more so than I would if I were unemployed. I know this for a fact.
I just kind of need to be making stuff all the time. And this episode that you're listening to is coming out on February 14th of 2024. And as most people probably know, that's Valentine's Day. And I am also putting out a video today on our social media channels about something that I've talked about on this podcast before. It is a fond Valentine's Day memory for myself. This is the 31st anniversary of the very first time I saw Regarding Henry. I remember the evening as if it were yesterday, but no, 31 years ago, it was February 14th, 1992. I was snacking on some Hershey's Kisses while our parents were out for dinner.
Really hoping for Ritz crackers.
Had I known...
How did you know? How would you have known?
Had I known to have a snack that would fit in with the movie, I would have had Ritz crackers. But lo and behold, I was given a bag of Hershey Kisses, and that's what I had on hand. So I recount that tale on our social medias. Also, we have a website, a URL. I don't know if you're going to be necessarily clamoring to go there to listen to the podcast because you're listening to it right now on your preferred podcast player, but ruinchildhoodspod.com is going to be your source. Right now, it just kind of has a little bit of information about us, links to our social stuff. Also, clearly, we have our link tree for all sorts of things that you can do, extra credit, if you will.
There's a wonderful picture. There's great pictures of us. There's like John looking very cool, standing in front of a DeLorean. Me at my absolute coolest. Yeah, at like age 12 or no, it's 14 because it's not peak awkward. It's not like seventh grade awkward.
You've got a cool 90s windbreaker on.
I do have, and I'm making some type of hand gesture, like not a gang sign and not an inappropriate hand gesture, but like I'm doing something fun, like, hey, here I'm planning Hollywood, rock on.
Hey, yeah, look at me.
Grease.
Check
I'm
me
posing
out.
in front of some Grease memorabilia. Grease is the word. Yeah, I was probably, you know what? I was probably in 10th grade. Because that was the year that my high school did the musical Grease, and it would make sense.
Well, Dan, let me tell you more about some other things that I want to draw our listeners' attention to. I talked about it before, but The Walt is another endeavor I have going on because I cannot sit still, and I encourage everybody to go to The Walt, that's THEWALT, .substack.com. There's also a link in this episode's description. It is an online community that you can sign up for. It's completely free. If you choose to pay $5 a month, you get extra content, but it is essentially an online community for people to watch documentaries and learn about the world, because it can be any topic really. And, get into a group discussion, essentially a book club where once a month, you have the entire month to engage in conversation, but on the first of the month, I send out information about a documentary where you can watch it without having to pay any money. Although if you choose to pay money, there are also those options. And it's just a great little community. So the first month has been really fun so far. We're only halfway through the month right now, but I certainly hope that our community engages in some conversation. Dan, you've been a member since the jump, and I hope that you've been enjoying the communications. They haven't been too much for you.
No, I enjoy it. I kind of look forward to like when there's like a new prompt or something I can do.
Yeah.
Just kind of like open up the app and, in just, a couple of minutes and look at the question or, look at the whatever prompt and just, take a moment and think about it. And The Thief Collector was such a fun ride. Such a fun ride of a movie. And at least for me, it's one that has kind of stuck with me, and I've referenced it in other conversations. I've I was like, oh, this is like this guy Jerry Alter. Let me tell you about him.
That's exactly why I love, sharing documentaries with people, is that, especially something like The Thief Collector, it's not going to be one where it's going to be like an award season smash, but it is so captivating to kind of follow along in the discussion. And, I really enjoy kind of the discourse that it creates once you start, talking with people about it and about these fascinating people who had this fascinating life that nobody really knew about until after they died. So that said, the next month is likely to be something that's maybe more of a more serious subject matter, but you will have to sign up and find out at thewalt.substack.com.
Oh, and you know what? I just remembered. I'm like, there's this question that when I think about The Thief Collector that keeps coming up. It's the one question that, like, since watching the movie, that kept coming up that I never got resolution on. And I don't need to bring it up right now, John, but we should talk about it.
Put it in the discussion thread.
Off air. Yes, I will absolutely put it in the discussion thread. But
cool.
It just popped into head. There we go.
There you go.
Out of mouth.
Well, speaking about anatomy, let's talk about Anatomy of a Murder from 1959, directed by Otto Preminger. Did you like that, Dan?
Murder the English language. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And what is it exactly that you teach high school students?
Oh
How to
my
string
goodness.
words together into a cohesive thought?
That's sometimes I wonder. I'm off the clock, man.
Well, who's not off the clock is Paul Beagler.
Nope, he is on the clock and ready to rock.
Yeah, so Dan, was this your first time seeing Anatomy of a Murder?
It sure was. Yeah.
What did you think?
Wow. So it was, for me, it was a tough kind of a tough movie to get into. And
oh, really?
I was watching it, like, I don't have a life where I can sit and watch a movie beginning to end, unless I want to start.
This is a long one, especially for 1959.
Unless I want to start waking up at 4 a.m. to watch movies, which, don't get me wrong, I've thought about it, but
yeah,
I'm not there yet. So I was following it. It was so interesting, and just at the end, there were so many things about this movie that I was impressed with, and that I felt without, and I'll wait for your synopsis, but there was so much about this film that I was just like I was so frustrated with it. Anytime I'd be frustrated with something, and it's kind of like I have the other voice in my head that just says, yeah, but that's kind of how it would be. Or like, that's how it is.
Interesting. Okay.
What, and yeah, so the trial I thought was fabulous. And there are also so many, as just somebody who's seen a lot of movies, and especially courtroom dramas. I do enjoy a good courtroom drama. We've certainly talked about them on here before, and the courtroom dramas that we've talked about, from A Time to Kill to A Few Good Men, and other ones, it was all of the DNA, it kind of felt like this is where it was coming from.
Sure, yeah.
And there were so many things that it just felt like, okay, like this movie that came much later is clearly, and rightfully so, like it is so well done. And I think the casting was fabulous, but it is not it's, if you like a nice, tight little clean resolution and you like to leave it feeling good. Yeah, it's not quite there. But anyway, John, what was this your first time watching it?
This was my first time watching it, and I really enjoyed myself. I was kind of drawn in from the very beginning, and I thought that Jimmy Stewart was excellent. I mean, I have a hard time finding a movie of his that I really don't like him in. I feel like he is selected for certain roles very methodically, and
Yes.
I really appreciate the variety that his career had. And this is a big one for that because, you know, when you look at other movies like Vertigo or Rear Window, or It's a Wonderful Life, you're getting, you know, entirely different versions of him. And what I do think is Jimmy Stewart at his strongest is when he's playing a bachelor. And I would even count Rear Window into that, you know, as well, even though he is, you know, dating somebody. What, you know, they want it to be a little bit more serious than maybe he does, at least at the beginning. And I feel like it's better when there's less of a romantic angle to it, where he's kind of got blinders on and he's just being really good at the thing that he does. And if it's something like Rear Window, you know, he is unable to do his job in work, which I can relate to, and so he needs to busy himself. He needs to find things to exercise that muscle that he has. I mean, he was a photojournalist in that one, and, you know, trying to solve a mystery from the window of his apartment is, you know, the only thing that he has to kind of keep himself going. And like we were saying before, I can perfectly relate to that in a very different way, fortunately. And in Anatomy of a Murder, you know, he is clearly a very good defense attorney, and his other passion is fishing and jazz piano, and this life that he has doesn't need a romantic figure in it. And I feel like most other directors would try to insert something like that in there, but it was wise for Otto Preminger to not try to incorporate that and kind of muddy things up. You're nodding. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think that Preminger, and I did some reading up, and you know, Preminger was a stage director prior to working in film, and then it was when he got into film, he ended up doing more acting because it was like during World War II. Right. And so, and they were like, hey, you are great at playing it. You could be great at playing a Nazi. So you could be the bad guy in every movie we're making now. So, I mean, like, whatever, job's a job. So, yeah, but yeah. So then, you know, he starts making movies, but like, he also didn't shy away from, like, he definitely wanted to tell stories that weren't being told. He directed The Man with the Golden Arm, a movie about heroin addiction in 1955. Yeah. So he helped to bust the blacklist by crediting Dalton Trumbo as screenwriter on 1960's Exodus. He,
Right.
I guess, shot in a gay bar for a movie for Advise and
Oh,
Consent.
really?
I'm reading this on the Criterion website. This is an essay by Nick Pinkerton.
Yeah. Well, what I also really admire, and specifically with Anatomy of a Murder, is that in the sense of that current state of like Hollywood filmmaking, it was an independent film. It went outside of the the studio systems way of functioning, with like it has its players involved, where he was taking people from the theater because that's where his background is. I'm sure that was a big part of it. And you have people who weren't, George C. Scott, he's taking him and kind of putting him in movies and stuff. And that was so cool. Ben Gazzara, completely nails it in this. I really admire the way that he utilizes Lee Remick and Eve Arden. Yeah. And also, he by incorporating Duke Ellington in 1959, not only as the one who scores it, but like putting him in the movie is, sending a clear message to Hollywood about like, no, this is what we need to be doing now.
Well, yeah, no, he clearly he's clearly someone who, I mean, and now learning a little bit more about him, who doesn't necessarily feel beholden to the Hollywood system because he already like pissed them off, and he had that reputation. So now at this point in 1959, he's like, well, like, what do I have to lose? I'm going to tell the stories I want to tell the way I want to tell them. And fortunately, you have actors like Jimmy Stewart who were like named stars that would go for these roles. And it's, I mean, much in the way that Denzel Washington has. And I mean, the actors that you usually hear compared to Jimmy Stewart, Tom Hanks, not as sure. I feel like Washington is closer for me, actually.
Okay.
Tom Hanks.
Yeah. I also, and this is going to be a little spoilery for this, but I really like how things aren't tied up really neatly at the end of this movie.
Oh,
it is an ending that would not have happened with probably most other directors at that time. Yeah, very pessimistic ending.
Well, I mean, a lot of the content of this movie and the language used, hearing Jimmy Stewart say panties.
And by the way, that part was also very funny when they were trying to discuss what to call women's underwear.
The humor. Oh my God. Oh yes. All the discussion.
At that moment, I was like, oh my God, George C. Scott, you are bringing humor for like the first time that I've ever seen you actually like bring humor. This is great.
Oh, magnificent.
Yeah. Well, why don't I do a little synopsis?
Yes,
were you just going to say that? Perfect.
I sure was.
A small-town Michigan defense attorney with a love for jazz piano and Italian cigars has to decide whether or not to bring on a controversial new client. Army Lieutenant Frederick Mannion shot and killed a tavern owner after he physically and sexually assaulted his wife, Laura. Mannion, who appears to show no remorse for what has happened, argues that he was justified in his crime despite not quite remembering the details as they happened in the moment. What appears to be an open and shut case for the prosecution raises questions for our jazz and cigar-loving lawyer, Paul Beegler, who recognizes that the crime of Laura's rape and battery should be looked at in the same light as the following murder. Beegler is also motivated by one other factor: money, since his law firm hasn't even brought in enough funds for him to pay his aide, Ms. Rutledge. But just as Beegler prepares his case for court, the prosecution also incorporates a new tactic, bringing on shark attorney, figuratively, not literally, Claude Dancer from the DA's office. But Beegler does the dancing, figuratively, not literally, in the courtroom, using clever tactics to sway the jury in the defense's favor. So, Jimmy Stewart plays Paul Beegler, Lee Remick is Laura Mannion, who's awesome in this, Ben Gazzara is Frederick Mannion, who's awesome at this, George C. Scott is Dancer, Eve Arden is Miss Rutledge. We also have Arthur O'Connell as Parnell McCarthy, who's a retired attorney who's friends with Beegler, who, encourages him to take the case. And
in the A Time to Kill parallel, he is the Donald Sutherland to James Stewart's Matthew McConaughey in that relationship dynamic.
In the Hoosiers sense of it, he is, just thinking because he's,
the Dennis Hopper
who's unreliable. He's the Dennis Hopper to Jimmy Stewart's Gene Hackman.
Yeah, he doesn't run into the courtroom drunk and stumble in drunk.
No, but he does crash the car, and
he crashes the car. But the information he gets, yes,
yeah, it's a very complete film. They don't gloss over the things that they do gloss over. They don't show the closing statements. I think that at that point it's just like, I feel like everybody knows enough. After watching Anatomy of a Murder, which, by the way, I have to keep on trying to stop myself from saying Anatomy of a Fall because that's so recent in my memory. But after watching Anatomy of a Murder, I also watched To Kill a Mockingbird and also 12 Angry Men, and which came out after this, which makes a lot of sense because I feel like Anatomy of a Murder broke a lot of ground in terms of like what you can now really say in cinema, and being able to acknowledge rape and sexual assault.
Well, and also if you put it in the context of a courtroom trial, it has a more formality to it.
Exactly, which is why they were able to do it. So I watched those, and To Kill a Mockingbird, the closing statement is like the big moment. And in Anatomy of a Murder, it's like there is none of that at all. In 12 Angry Men, there's no courtroom at all. You're only in the jury room. Which, by the way,
so intense.
I was in a high school production, not 12 Angry Men. I was in 12 Angry Jurors, which was the 2001 version of Being Woke because there were girls in it.
I saw it. Yes, I remember.
I was the bailiff. I was not an angry juror.
See, and then before that, not 10 years, but earlier, I, in that very same high school on that very same stage, was in the early 90s version of Being Woke, the female version of The Odd Couple.
Right. The gender swap.
Yes. So
That's
I played, and but because also the early 90s version of Being Woke included casting me as one of the two Spanish brothers, and then I was just gonna say darkening my skin and my hair.
Yeah, I was gonna point out the fact that they maybe didn't focus on every aspect of
we were
representation.
Really not woke at all. But I guess that was on the way. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to Anatomy of a Murder. So okay, the things that I really appreciated about this, and I think this is where the casting of James Stewart is so, like you said, very intentional. And he's one of those actors he's a great actor who can play a role, but part of what makes him work in a movie like this is where he has so much of this like built up credibility from the first 15 years of his career, where it was largely like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and he was
when you see him,
Cowboys.
You think this is the good guy,
right? And and in this, it's not necessarily that he's not the bad. There's not I don't want to say that there's not bad people, but there's not like a bad guy and a good guy in here. There are lawyers who are doing their jobs to the best of their abilities, regardless of what that means. So for Biegler, he's trying to shift the focus, first of all, from the murder of Quill, the bar owner, to the assault of
Who we
Laura
never see.
Mannion.
This all takes place after that. Yeah.
Right. And we are also never, like, I think we're given enough to figure it out, but we're never told. It's implied that perhaps it wasn't, that it was a consensual encounter between Laura and Quill. There's no real evidence given either way. There's just doubt. And you know that in a trial, the prosecution has the burden of proof. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. So Beagler's job. So you're like, yeah, but you're James Stewart, and also what makes it work is Ben Gazzara, because like that temporary insanity is bullshit, and he is like, and he is so smug. He is so good in this, and you can just, I mean, I love it because I love the Big Lebowski and Jackie Treehorn, and just thinking
Jackie Treehorn.
Among other Ben Gazzara, like, the 70s roles, Killing of a Chinese Bookie. But seeing him in this, and he's so young, but he's just so, he's so like slimy. And you're like, you are a piece of shit. Like,
he's very frustrating because he doesn't seem to understand that he needs to change his attitude. He needs to come across at least looking a little innocent, or at least like justified. But instead, he just digs himself into deeper holes by being himself.
Right, but spoiler alert, it still works out for him.
Right. It works out for him, and I think that a lot of that just hinges on I think that it all hinges on this one witness that Beagler manages to get, who is I don't want to give away too much.
Right.
But
it's hard.
She is the kind of the missing piece of the puzzle that at least creates question about the character of Quill and the reality of the story of Laura's rape.
And it's also an opportunity that Beagler sees to kind of bait the dancer. And the prosecution.
Yeah.
By the way, I love the other lawyer for the prosecution, who's kind of a doofus.
He gets sidelined. Doofus
He's kind of such a doofus. And then George C. Scott, who almost does look like a shark in this, but who's just like, he's a really good lawyer, but it's like you just see him getting that head full of steam and taking the bait. So it's like, yeah, Mannion doesn't do himself any favors by not acting guilty. And the look on his face is, and what are you going to do about it? How are you going to prove it?
Well, and clearly, Beagler has to do a lot of training with the defense to enhance their credibility, by making Laura stop going out and getting drunk and hanging out with guys and giving anybody any reason to think that, there was a consensual relationship between herself and Quill. And it's a really great moment that when he does kind of like snap her out of it and like bring her in line. And then as soon as she doesn't have to have that facade on, she takes it off. She gets drunk and she like chats with him in the courthouse.
And what's interesting is it makes me think, and this is, I think, part of the genius of the direction of the film, and also the writing is, Beagler has this line after, I forget the context of it, but Laura asks him, he does some thing in front of the court, and there's an objection, and the objection sustained, so he gets shut down, and the judge is like, the jury will like strike that from the record, and she's like, how can the jury unhear something that they've heard? And he says they can't. Well, you as the the jury doesn't see that Laura is out getting drunk at the honky tonk or wherever she is, but the audience does.
Right.
So, and we can't forget that.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
And also it's like all the conversations that Biegler has in private with Mannion, like the audience hears those and sees that. So we are definitely led in a direction.
And while you're mentioning that, with the initial conversations that Biegler has with Mannion at the jail, at first when I was watching it, I was like, okay, he goes to talk to Mannion to kind of figure out if he's going to take on this case. And then he goes and he talks to Laura, and then he goes back and talks to Mannion. It's like, no wonder this movie's so long. And then like after watching it, I was like, oh, I totally get it. I totally see, like, we need to see how Biegler is processing this information. And we need to see that he realizes, like, this is a guilty man and should go to prison, but you know, there's something that's bringing me back, and like, you know, being able to understand that as the audience, I think is more important than, you know, consolidation of screen time.
Well, right. And you said it right there. It's about its process. It's about the process. We don't see the closing statements, and we're not told conclusively whether or not Mannion was temporarily insane when he did it.
Right.
I think that one we're pretty, like, given a pretty solid sense of at least what Preminger thinks.
Yeah.
But we're also really not, unless there's something I missed, I feel like the consensual nature of the relationship between Laura and Quill is implied, but not as strongly. There's still I think there's still just as much evidence. There's not enough reason to doubt her story.
Yeah.
But I love, in another movie that this reminded me of, especially when they were talking about how she was dressed, and there was a lot of questioning about, and it made me, and also the pinball, The Accused with Jodie Foster and Kelly McGillis, where
Jodie Foster, who's great in the new season of True Detective.
Yes, also in Naiad.
She's fantastic in Naiad.
Yes. I've not seen the new season of True Detective. I've not seen all of Naiad, but I've seen enough to know
that she's very good in it.
Yes. I mean, she's Jodie Foster. I can't think of much that she's not good in. But
making maybe her decisions in Friends. Mel Gibson.
Well, yes. That blind spot is troubling. Okay. But getting back to Anatomy
okay, so you're talking about pinball. You're talking about, you know,
but that reminded
how
me
was she dressed? Yeah,
that reminded me of The Accused. But this movie was all about the process, and about, again, it comes back to Jimmy Stewart not necessarily being, because like you said, he pretty much recognizes this guy's guilty and should go to jail, but I'm his lawyer.
Yeah.
And my job is to defend him and provide the best defense, and whatever happens,
because it's never in question about whether or not he killed Quill. That is, you know, accepted fact.
Right.
It's a matter of, was it first degree murder?
Right.
Was it premeditated? That's the thing. And that was a really fascinating part of it, because you don't really even still see a lot of like courtroom dramas where it's just like, look, the guy killed somebody, but that's not what we're really here to talk about. We're here to talk about the specific, thing that they're in jail for.
were they in control of their faculties
exactly
when they committed the crime? And I love there's also the question of whether or not the other guy who worked at the bar, if he was
Alphonse Paquette, great character name, and also Murray Hamilton, mayor from Jaws. Love to see him.
And in Jaws 2.
And
notably.
in Jaws 2, famously.
Yes. Oh, by the way, speaking of casting of in the trial, we cannot ignore Joseph Welch,
yes, an actual attorney
who was famous from the Army McCarthy hearings with Joseph McCarthy.
Yeah.
He was the one who said that line, "Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last?" That was him. And he is so good. And I was, as I'm watching it, I'm writing down, I'm like, oh, damn, this is before I looked into who this was. Oh man, the judge is so good. I love this guy.
He's fantastic. He's great.
And it's and of course, the reactions, oh, well, he was a lawyer, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a great actor and play a judge really well. And he's awesome.
Another lawyer who played a judge, and I need to pull this up. Alan Barinholtz, father of Ike Barinholtz, who was an attorney and played the judge in the show Jury Duty.
Oh, right. Yes.
The reality TV show about the one juror who thinks they're just being documented about what the jury duty process is like. But everybody's an actor. It's all fake. And so he was the judge. And the reason why he was able to, play a judge is because he was in so many courtrooms as a lawyer. And he just knew what judges, he knew how to play a credible judge. But, I think that he retired and then just started acting, probably because both of his sons are actors. And he's just like, yeah, all right, I'll do that. And he's great in Jury Duty.
Yes.
But absolutely, Joseph Welch was so good. I mean, we mentioned the panties discussion. He's fantastic in that. When they're in his judge's chambers and he's got the fly fishing or the lure, which was mwah, beautifully done, chef's kiss.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very cool movie. Now, you know what we haven't talked about is Michigan.
This filmed on location in Michigan.
Yes. Yeah.
And which also not very standard, procedure for a movie like this, especially. A lot of it's indoors, doesn't need to be in Michigan, but it is.
No, well, also because it was based on an actual case.
Yep.
And they filmed in a lot of the locations where things actually happened. Even though it was it's not exactly the same. This is not a movie about that crime and that case. It's inspired by it, and the setting, I think kind of that sense of, I've never been to Michigan, but I just assume Michigan just being kind of quiet, unassuming, you go by the lake or whatever, and you just,
which one?
Pick one. They're all great. And I've never been. Have you been to Michigan?
I've never been to Michigan. No. I know a lot of people from Michigan. I hear it's fantastic. I know some people who either lived in or live in Detroit and speak very highly of it. But no, haven't been myself.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've been there now that I've seen this.
Well, what's interesting about it is you definitely have that, that just kind of people just want to kind of go about their business and be left alone in this community. And that someone people like the Manions are definitely, outliers.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they live in a trailer park. And, he is military, he's from the Army. And I don't get the impression that he's, spent a lot of time there. I don't remember if they say exactly how they ended up there.
Right.
That's that's just kind of how things shook out. And yeah, I don't know. Michigan is
and
a
then they
really
leave. Like,
yeah. I feel like Michigan is a really good setting for this also because it's like, I feel like there's a different attitude that comes into it if you're in different parts of the country. If you are in the South, it becomes a different type of vibe. We've seen that in our Grisham's stories. Also, if you know, To Kill a Mockingbird, for example, you're going to see a very different type of courtroom. Way more overalls than
My Cousin
than you would
Vinny,
see.
you know.
My Cousin Vinny. Oh my God. Talk about perfect courtroom films. That not a drama, but courtroom films.
No, but great. But it
Yeah.
is a highly regarded among attorneys, as is Anatomy of a Murder.
As is Anatomy of a Murder. Yeah, absolutely. And, you were saying that getting the impression of, how Michigan, the vibe is like. I would say that another film that demonstrates that, I feel like in a very appropriate way, is Grosse Pointe Blank, which I imagine we would have probably done this for this episode had we not done it before.
Correct. Yeah.
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 Just like a perfect Michigan movie.
Right. And of course, we're looking at our visits here. We're looking to stay outside of the major cities, which left, and while we're kind of mentioning Detroit, which, also RoboCop, we've done it, but a classic Detroit set movie. Just want to shout out the movie Blue Collar, and I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to come back to it at some point. But that's a Paul Schrader film from 1980 or 79.
I can picture the poster, but I don't know if I've seen the movie.
It's kind of like marketed as a comedy, and Richard Pryor's in it. Well, it's Richard Pryor, Harvey Keitel, and Yaphet Kotto.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, there's definitely some humor in it, but it's also like there's some crime elements involved. It's a movie that kind of defies genre, but it's a really interesting movie about like working in the auto industry at a time when a lot of the auto industry was moving to Japan.
Right.
And where like a lot of auto workers were losing their jobs in Michigan. Yeah. So
and maybe we'll cover Roger and Me on The Walt to give a little bit more color to that story.
Yeah, we definitely talked about that as a possibility, but I'm glad we talked about Anatomy of a Murder.
Sure. Also, it'd be a crime in itself, not to mention the incredible poster artwork and credits artwork by Saul Bass.
Oh,
iconic, completely iconic artwork done for this movie. I was very much inspired by Saul Bass in our own podcast artwork. It's easy to replicate his style, and very hard to make it seem like you're not ripping him off.
Right. Well, it's homage.
Yeah, but you know what? It just like a completely perfect. I mean, maybe if anything, it feels a little too hip for this kind of a movie, but it works
also,
so well.
Same thing with the score. It's a bit right. It does feel a bit off, especially in the opening credits. But I think it makes it. I think especially the scene with Duke Ellington kind of brings it together and makes it make sense.
And I also think, and I was thinking a lot about, why were they using jazz and why was jazz like his thing? Because, there's that scene where Parnell is just like, oh, why not play like an old standard or whatever? And then he like does like a jazzy version of it on the piano. And it's like, it's kind of his style as an attorney to kind of do what you're not expecting him to do. And I don't know if I was being a little more generous with that, because I do also see like, I don't know, a lot of what he's doing is kind of like, what's expected. But I don't know. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt that it is kind of like jazz lawyering.
Well, it is because jazz has like a lot, there's a lot of fluctuation in tempo, and it all comes together. It all makes sense, but like especially the jazz of that era of the 50s was it kind of came out of improvisation, but then the recordings of it, of course, weren't. We're usually not by then they kind of had it down, kind of like a trial lawyer would, where it's all going to come together. They know they're going to, even when you have a great jazz ensemble that's improving, they're going to bring it all together at the end. It's all
you still have to play within the
sense.
rules of the courtroom, but there are places where you can zig and zag a little bit.
Well, also when you know the rules, you know what you can do with the rules. And it goes back to the whole thing about the jury can't unhear something. It's okay, well, the judge is going to strike that, but that's not the point. I just want to make sure they have that in their heads.
Yeah.
So understanding the rules and understanding how far he can go. Absolutely. He does. He's not afraid of an objection.
It's part of it. It's you're playing the game. You're kind of you know that has to be part of the dance a little bit. The dancer.
Again.
But Dan, not dance.
Dan,
I would love to know what you would do with Anatomy of a Murder here in 2024.
What would I do? And, I was going to allude to this and say that, perhaps the jazzy score is not something that I would involve in a remake, but I think a remake offers a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think you could do this because also one of the cool things about courtroom dramas is that the aspects of a courtroom and the way that a trial is run is still pretty much the same.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of the aspects of it wouldn't have to change, but you could change things and you could still hold on to the themes of it and that kind of intentional vagueness around certain events. And you could certainly bring different themes out. You could find different themes. I don't think like a word for word remake is necessary, but I think a remake that adheres to kind of like this setup and this like these characters. I would definitely I would want to keep Beagler. I would want to keep these characters, not necessarily these people, but these characters. I want to see that Lieutenant Mannion, who has committed a crime and does not regret it and just wants somebody to get him free so that he could probably go on and go somewhere else and do the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I would want that. I would still want that kind of that detachment. And that's why I was thinking about possible filmmakers and in this, because I feel like that's important. I feel like Preminger being, like we were saying, not everybody, most directors wouldn't have been able to make the movie this way.
Right.
And I thought about Jane Campion
as
a director, because I'm thinking about somebody who can find the tension in stillness. And I thought
totally.
And she's done that. I wonder, like, not just The Power of the Dog, going back to the piano is the other film that stands out to me. And I feel like she can find so much in subtlety, especially in actors and in their performances, but I mean, she also, I think that she could, I would love to see what she would do with a courtroom drama.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be I'd be interested in that. Maybe on the brain because of In the Bedroom, but Todd Field is somebody else who I think kind of has the right feel for this, because this is not something that I feel should be like sped up or I think it should still be as a movie, something that you go on and that you go on that ride in that one sitting and not like stretch it out to be a series. But
you could have Kate Blanchett as Paula Beagler.
Well, it's funny if you're thinking, is that the Todd Field version? Because I was thinking for the Jane Campion version of Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh, yeah.
I just automatically, I was thinking of different people, and I was like, well, who's played a lawyer before? Who's the right age? And like, there's a lot of actors, and I thought about Cumberbatch, and I mean, there are a lot of other actors who would be great, and probably actors who would be better. But I'm like, I could see him in this role. I could see him being that type of person who's so fixated on being a lawyer. And I could even see him doing the jazz thing. And it doesn't have to take place in 1959, or he could do some other form of, musical performance or something, like that lawyer who
I could also see him as the dancer role.
Oh, well, yeah. That's, I did not think that far in terms of casting. I was like, I would love to see Michael Douglas as kind of like the old, I forget the name of the guy, but like the old drunk who.
Oh yeah. Parnell.
Yeah. Parnell.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that would be, again, other actor there. I'm sure there's lots of other actors who would be fun in that role, but that could be a fun Michael Douglas role. Well, so yeah, that's, I think, and that's Christopher McQuarrie was another name that came up, because when he's not doing Mission Impossible movies, like I still think as the screenwriter of The Usual Suspects, and a lot of other really good movies that weren't Mission Impossible sequels, which he kind of mastered the art of that subgenre. But I was like, I would love to see a Christopher McQuarrie kind of return to this, though I think his courtroom drama would be a little showier than what a Jane Campion would produce. But what say you, John?
Well, I mean, I was definitely thinking remake, and it should be acknowledged there was a stage adaptation of Anatomy of a Murder. I would love to see a performance of that at some point if somebody's putting one on. But I think that for a remake, there's definitely a lot that can be done with this. I think that sticking pretty close to the original could totally work. The question is then, is it set present day? Because I feel like the conversation changes from 1959 to present day about, the credibility of a woman claiming sexual assault. And that all depends on what state she's in and kind of who's involved. But there's a lot more now to back the thought of like, you cannot victim shame and, say that they are asking for it based on what they're wearing. And, that's certainly an area. And there also wouldn't be as much, I guess, shying away from, women's underwear and things like that. Where
you would not have to have the panty discussion.
And honestly, you shouldn't, whether you do it, set it back in the 50s or 60s or whatever versus now, because they did that bit perfectly in the Preminger version. And it's like, You can find plenty of other things to kind of have a moment of levity during such a serious trial. You can find plenty of other things to do there. And so I I think that the question does, exist of like, well, when does this take place? And I don't think it should take place present day. Not necessarily that it should take place in 1959. Maybe it's in the 70s. Maybe it's in the 1930s. There are definitely a lot of opportunities to explore this type of complicated courtroom situation. And what Anatomy of a Murder does so well that we've talked about is having the protagonist be such a, a likable person that you go into probably thinking that he's likable, not because of what you're necessarily seeing on screen, even though it's very charming what he's doing at all moments, but also the fact that as an actor, you've seen him so much before, and you like him already going into it. And I feel like that is something, like you were saying before about kind of like having the audience being brought into it. That's another way that the audience is brought into it, because they are familiar with the lead actor. And I think
they trust
that
him.
Exactly, that goes a long way. And for a movie like this, where that person is defending somebody who is, without question, a murderer, where, how do you kind of bring people in, and who do you have do that? Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington are both aged out, I think, of this type of role.
Also, they've done, especially Denzel Washington has done, famously with Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, but also more recently the Roman Israel movie he did a few
Roman
years
J.
ago.
Israel Esquire. Yeah. And so, but, not that it needs to be a 1-for-1 match for Jimmy Stewart, but, somebody who's maybe in their mid 40s, maybe even 50, somebody, I don't know, John Hamm, like where you're probably going into it being like, yeah, I can watch him. He's fun to watch, No. I don't know if he's, immediately, because he's played characters that are quite unlikable, but there are, maybe it's somebody like Donald Glover, where it's like, and you trust him from some of the work that he's done that's maybe more comedic, and you're a fan of his music and things like that kind of bring you in and kind of set your mind in a certain place before he even says a word on screen. So I don't know. If you're listening, ruinchildhoodspot@gmail.com. Who would be your, new Jimmy Stewart? I feel like that's a kind of a conversation that comes up a lot for people, is like, who is the new Tom Hanks? Who is the new Jimmy Stewart?
Right.
And no, it's not Colin Hanks.
No. I don't know. And like, who kind of has that quality that, like another, and I wouldn't go in this direction, because again, I feel like been there, done that with him, but like Robert Downey Jr. is another one who kind of fits that.
But he's
profile.
Complicated. He's complicated.
He's complicated, but I think at this point, though, he's kind of got the goodwill. He's got more of the goodwill back. So, yeah, I mean, unless there's something I don't know. I haven't checked the internet in a couple of hours.
Oh, well, people are still pretty divided on his role in Tropic Thunder. I think that even all of the Iron Man of it all, I see a lot of discourse online about people, questioning that decision from that movie. Okay.
I mean, I get that. Again, I don't know that that's necessarily something I'd hold against Robert Downey Jr. per se, but
But that's what people are doing, though. So here's what I've noticed. As a regular visitor to the the Just Watch app to see what is new on streaming services, I will notice that if a movie comes onto a streaming service that maybe hasn't been for a while, people watch it and maybe are seeing it for the first time, or are seeing it for the first time in a long time. and a new discourse comes up on social media about those movies and these roles. And Tropic Thunder is one of them, where it wasn't streaming for a long time, and then it recently became back on streaming services, and now there is a new discourse. Because for a lot of people who are, watching a lot of movies on streaming services, it's not like everybody's looking at it from the context of when it came out. They're looking at it as like, because Tropic Thunder, I mean, it looks like it could have come out this year, essentially. It doesn't feel like an old movie by any sense, but because Robert Downey Jr. has done so much since then. But anyway, what people see is Robert Downey Jr. not necessarily considering the point of what he's doing and the message of what he's doing, but the fact that it just is in the first place. And and
the context doesn't matter as much, I think.
Context doesn't matter as much. Plus, once it starts becoming part of the social media zeitgeist, it's not that people are watching the full movie. They're watching the clips that people are sharing and forming opinions based on the clips. So we're kind of just living in this whole different world of, movie discourse, whether or not it should be, taken seriously or with a grain of salt. It's hard to say, but it's out there, and that's kind of how things are going presently.
Oh man. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. I feel like because when you find yourself trying to explain it and say like, well, there's context, it's like you kind of hear yourself and then you're like, am I just apologizing for something because I found it funny at the time? Like,
right.
And Tropic Thunder was not my favorite movie. I felt Tropic Thunder, I enjoyed it, but felt it was a bit overrated. Wouldn't have nominated Robert Downey Jr. for the Academy Award.
Right. And I think that's another reason why it creates such a, big conversation around. Anyway.
Yeah. So
anyway, who everybody likes? Ryan Gosling. He would be Jimmy Stewart.
I was thinking about Gosling. Of course everyone likes Gosling. He's just kind of...
Everyone likes Gosling.
Yeah. No, yeah, but it was such a great actor who I think does absolutely... Oh, what about Steve Carell?
Steve Carell could be interesting. The only thing that I've seen him in recently was The Morning Show, where he essentially plays Matt Lauer.
Okay.
Post controversy. But yeah, I think that given the love that everybody seems to have for The Office, he does have a lot of cred there.
Yeah, well,
maybe even John Krasinski would be a Jimmy Stewart kind of person.
Yeah. I mean, maybe John Krasinski, behind the camera.
Could be.
Who knows? He seems to be going in that direction. There are a lot of options. There are a lot of directions that you could go. Again, you can email us at ruinedchildhoodspod@gmail.com or
please do
drop a message on an Instagram post or TikTok and let us know what you think.
Yeah, maybe I'll post a TikTok video. Who is the new Jimmy Stewart?
Give us your 2 cents. Not even literally 2 cents.
But if you want to give us 2 cents, go to our TeePublic store. Yeah. Maybe there's a sale going on where something
or
is
put
2
that
cents.
towards your $5 monthly payment to subscribe to the Waltz and get
there you go
extra bonus content.
I mean, speaking of Michael Douglas, he may make an appearance in one of the next few months' documentary picks. We'll see.
Oh my God! All right, the suspense.
Little
is
teaser.
Me. God, it's great.
Well, Dan, for anybody,
Michael Douglas fan, but yeah,
Dan, for anybody who is maybe in suspense, wondering what we're going to cover in our next episode, why don't you put them out of their misery? What are we going to be covering?
Well, of course, we're going to Minnesota, and I'm sure we'll talk about The Greatest Ball of Twine, but what we're going to be talking about the most, I'm so excited for this one, and this is such a movie that's kind of had such a cult around it. It is 1999's Drop Dead Gorgeous, directed by Michael Patrick Jann, starring Kirstie Alley, Ellen Barkin,
Yeah.
I get Ellen Barkin, Kirsten Dunst, Denise Richards. We got Amy Adams, Allison Janney, Brittany Murphy, pour one out.
Yep.
And yeah, so I have not seen this. Have you seen this one before, John?
It's been a long time. And also Michael Patrick Jan of The State. So mad respect there.
Yes. And it's been a while for me too. And I can't wait. I'm excited to watch it and to talk about it.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited. Like I said before, go on Spotify, go on Apple Podcasts, rate and review. Nothing less than 5 stars, please. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok. Check out thewalt.substack.com. Our website is ruinchildhoodspod@gmail.com. Our email address is ruinchildhoodspod@gmail.com. Our website is ruinchildhoodspod.com. And geez, where do I go with this one? Dan, as you are being swayed to go down the stream by a fisherman's lure, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.